My name is Helen Rubenstein. The date is July 29th, 1992. I am interviewing for the Holocaust Oral Testimonies Project at the Martyrs Memorial Museum in Los Angeles, California. Assisting in the interview is Mary Rothschild. We are interviewing Regina Friedland. Mrs. Friedland, would you state your full name, which includes your maiden name and your married names, your birth date, and the place of birth, including both the city and country?
Yes, I am born in Pruszków under Warsaw in 6/5/1924. It was my maiden name is Postolska. My parents' name, should I say? Yeah.
If you wish, yes.
Yes. My parents' name was, my father was David Postolsky and mother Esther Postolska. And it was a small place under Warsaw. It was not very many Jewish people there.
Give us your married name, both your married names.
Yes, my married name is my first husband, Gotc, Regina Gotc, Gotc, and my second marriage is Friedland, Regina Friedland.
Can you tell us about your life from your early childhood until things began to change? What did your family consist of? Brothers, sisters? What did your father do? What kind of work he did?
We had a dry goods store, and I like to help there all the time. But of course, I had a brother. My older brother was born in 1920, and I had a little brother which was born in 1932. And I was going to a public school. I didn't want to go to a Jewish school somehow, but my brother was going to a Hebrew school, to private, and then later on to a Hebrew gymnasium in Warsaw. He was also taking violin lessons, which he was very, very good. And when the war broke out, we had to...
Can you give us a little more background information? What was it, a close family? What kind of activities did you
It was a very close family. We had uncles. I had two uncles and lots of cousins in Pruszków, and I had one uncle who lived in Warsaw and had two children. And just I cannot talk. It's just.
When did you become aware of the fact that life was changing for you and your family? How did you become aware?
Well, I was very, very close to my mother especially. I was like to help her all the time. And of course, when my younger brother was born, I was 9 years old, and I loved them very, very much, and I helped them a lot, raising this little boy. I belonged to Zionist organizations, and I was very active as a child. And right before the war, when I finished grade school, I was going to art school. It's like a high school, and they've been teaching us trade, which I was like wanted to be a seamstress, which helped me later on in the war, doing, some sewing and some things. And when the war broke out in 1939, my father, they had to announce something. My father was sitting by the radio, and we've been all very tense, and then they say the war broke out, and my father fell from the chair and he had a stroke because he was in the first war in Russia as a prisoner. And that reminds him, that war is not very, it's not good. And so the first bomb was falling in Pruszków, so my mother sent me and my little brother to Warsaw because they say a capital city won't give up so easy, it will be safer. And then later on, it was no transportation, so they came walking, my father got a little bit better, and they walked to Warsaw, we went by my uncle's house, the whole family, it was about 40 people in about 3 rooms, and every alarm we've been running to the shelters, and, to the basements for a shelter. And then, of course, the Germans came, and we came back to Pruszków, and then right away they say, you cannot have your own businesses. We had to give away everything, like radios and jewelry and whatever, belonged to us. So my mother gave our store to a Polish couple, and, she was thinking maybe they will help us out. But later on they took us to a small ghetto in Pruszków also. So it was just almost nothing. We had to leave everything, just a little, clothes, little belongings, whatever we could carry. And they took me, the Germans, young people had to work every day, for the German soldiers. I was cleaning the bathrooms, and they very dirty work, and they've been beating us up and, making fun of us. And in a short time, they closed this. They took us all in the trains. We didn't know where we were going, but it was by train was about 10-15 minutes to Warsaw. We've been going there for about 8 hours. Finally, they stopped in Warsaw. It was the ghetto already there, and they threw us in there. Go wherever you wanted without, they disinfect, all our belongings, and we had to wash in such a terrible, solution, we thought we were going to get blind. So we've been lucky that our uncle, my father's brother was there, and he took us in, and later on he found us a little room. My brother, my older brother, beginning 39, he ran away from home. He went to a kibbutz in Benjin, and because he was a very big Zionist, he wanted to go to Palestine. But when the war broke out, he came back. He came to to Ghetto to be together with us. And he was working for the Germans, on the railroad. And for me, I didn't look like a typical Jewish girl, supposedly. And I was jumping through the wires, later on through the walls to bring some food to the house, so we wouldn't starve. Of course, every day when I was going down the steps, I was going through, dead people, corpses, because, the hunger was very, very, we had just little portions of bread and whatever, it was not enough to survive. And later on, somehow I got typhus. I was sick. I was very sick. But in this building used to live a doctor, so he was giving me some shots, which, helped me to, for 8 days, I was in a coma.
In terms of time, how much time had elapsed since the war began in 1939 when you were 15?
Yeah.
You were 15.
Yeah, 1939, that was in September, the war broke out. And in end of 1940, they throw us in the Warsaw Ghetto. And then, so I had typhus, and my mother was taking good care of me. The first thing that I remember when I woke up was my mother was just looking at me, I see still her face in front of my eyes. And she was asking me if I want to eat something. I said, yes, I want a pear. And she says, a pear in Ghetto? It was impossible. But she was running through, every place, and she got me this pear. And I wanted raw. She cooked for me, and I didn't want to eat. And I remember she was pulling her hair. She was going through all these troubles to give me this pear, and I didn't want to eat. But anyway, then, took a little while. I put myself, on my feet. And in a short time, in 1942, they started to taking people out from the ghetto. And while I was not home, at that time I was in a different street. The street was blockaded, and I was looking, through the barriers, and I see my mother was going with my little brother, surrounded with all the Germans shooting all over. And I wanted going, I didn't know what was going on, but I wanted to go together with her, but they didn't let me. And I was running through side streets all the way to Umschlagplatz, where all the trains been going, we didn't know at that time where. They've been telling us that they're going for work. So with this my mind, but anyway, they didn't let me go to the Umschlagplatz. I sent a Jewish policeman who knew my mother and told him, please save my mother. And he is coming back. He talked to my mother, and she says, Pani Postolska, save yourself. And she says, no, I'm very tired. And my brother was, sick, and she went to the trains. So with this mind, to eventually to go and to find my mother. In the meantime, later on, they took my father away too, and they liquidated the small ghetto, and I had to go to the big ghetto.
Your father had somewhat recovered from the stroke?
Yeah, from the stroke, yeah, because
he was able to walk.
He walked. So as a matter of fact, he had like a stroke in his mouth. He couldn't speak. He could walk a little bit later on, but was still some doctors available. So
when did they take him away? Do you remember?
My mother, they took her away in 42 in May. And my father went, I think, because we couldn't stay in the same room. So he had a little place with somebody, and I couldn't be with my father either. So I was going through and waving. He was in the window waving to me. But in around July, I didn't see him anymore. It was no one there. So I never knew where they took my parents and what happened to them. But later on, I found out, after the war, that all of this from Ghetto, and this time they took him to Treblinka.
What happened to your little brother?
He went together with my mother. I was seeing my mother, holding my brother by her hand, and she together. He was 9. He was almost 10-year-old when they took him away. Gorgeous child. He was just gorgeous.
And then what happened to you after that?
So my brother, he was taking care of me always to see that I will be, safe. And I was under his care, like I say, in the big ghetto. And of course, we didn't have to eat there. I was standing in line for a little soup, and it was one man from Pruszków, what he was working with for the Germans, and he recognized, he said, "What are you doing here?" With a face like that, "Run away, don't stay here. You have, your brain is not working." So I told this to my brother, and he was working, for the Germans every day. They've been going with a group to work on the railroad. And he got acquainted with a Polish railroad man, and he and his friend, we didn't have no money, but his friend had, a little money, and they bought papers for me, for my brother, and for my friend. So they promised this railroad worker, he was living in Miłosna under Warsaw, that for him to save us, we're going to stay with him, we're going to bring him lots of money. So the first thing, they sent me out, I went with a group, for work, with the armband, with this star. And when the Germans been turning away their heads, I ran into a house. I was running up to the attic, waiting till the evening. That's all what I had. Is a couple of pictures, and that's all what I, had on me. One pair of shoes and whatever. I couldn't take nothing with me. And so in the evening, I took the train and I went to the railroad, to the Polish guy. I went over there, and I was expecting our friend and my brother to come. And my brother came after 3 weeks, and he says, "I'm sorry, we cannot be here. We don't have no money," because the friend, but he had the money. When he went through the gate, from the ghetto, and they seen the Germans when he had some more clothes on him. As a matter of fact, he had some of my dresses for me, and they shot him. And my brother had to drag him back to the ghetto and bury him. And he came out and he says, so the Polish guy says, "Well, we cannot keep you, we don't have no money." So my brother says, "Okay, I'm going to go a little bit farther and maybe look for some work." And we had these Irish papers, what he bought from him. And my brother didn't look like a Jew. He was, blonde and blue eyes. And we spoke a beautiful Polish. And after a while, he's coming back. And he says, "Yes, I found a place where they want you to work too." And it was in under Siedlec, that was closer to the Russian border. It was a very, very small village, and it was burned down, and that he was working for one man, what the wife was expecting, and they were looking for a cheap, for a cheap labor. So he says, "Well, I cannot." My brother, me, arrived over there. He came after me. So he said, "I cannot pay you much. I can give you a sack of potatoes for a year, and a sack of wheat, and of course food to eat." Yes, okay. So I learned how to work on the field, how to milk the cow, how to ride a horse in a very short time. Believe me, it was not easy. I couldn't move. I didn't have no idea how to work. In my life, I didn't make any. I didn't know how to cook. I didn't even boil water at home. So, but I learned everything very fast. And they liked me very much because I spoke Polish, beautiful, and they spoke, you know, the small villages in a very bad dialect like. So they had a little girl. She was about 6-year-old, Helena, and I had to say the prayers every morning and every evening aloud with her, so she will learn how to speak Polish nicely. And of course I knew all these prayers because in public schools before the classes you had to say aloud the prayers. And I had quite a few Polish, you know, Christians, friends, what the holidays and everything I knew about, you know, Christmas, and I knew about all the holidays and everything. And actually I was I liked Poland. I was like a patriot, you know. I like these songs, and I knew the history and everything. And I was very disappointed. I said, how can they do things like this, you know, to someone? And it was just terrible for me. And my brother was also in this village. He couldn't stay in one. For a boy, it was a little bit different, you know, than for a girl. He was playing violin on some weddings and some, you know, helping with the field and everything, but he always was coming in to see if everything is okay with me. And of course the Germans been coming in, and so much young people had to go to Germany, you know, from the village, you know, they call it contingent, you know, for work for the Germans, because the Germans had to go to war, you know, in the army. So somebody had to work there. So they saying, oh, this is this, you know, girl from Warsaw here, let her go, you know, not our children. But this farmer what I was working for him, you know, it was cheap labor, so he says, no, she's not going. But anyway, when the Germans been coming and they've been catching these young people, so they made a shelter for me in a barn, that when the Germans been coming in, you know, I had somebody said, oh, the Germans are coming. So I went over there in the shelter. I was so relieved, and over there, my God, nobody was looking at me, you know. When I was walking, you know, I was always thought, okay, they know who I am. So I was always going around with my eyes down, with my head down. So one time the priest, I was going to church, you know, almost every day. I was a very good Christian. I was going to communion, and I was going to, what do you say in English, you know, when you say the sins. I was making that up, of course.
Did the farmer know you were Jewish?
No. They've been so terrible. They've been Jewish girls coming from the forest. It was the big forest close by, coming for food. And they've been calling the Germans. And the Germans came, they were killing them. I seen it in front of my eyes. One day, it was winter time, I sit in the house, and it was a little boy coming to the door, through the door. He was about, maybe 8 years old or 9. And I recognized the child. It was from my hometown, from Pruszków, going together with my little brother to kindergarten school. He didn't recognize it. He was like half frozen. I asked him, what is your name? Eluś Jeremiasz. I said, where is your parents? The Germans came to the forest and they killed them all. And he's hungry. I put him by the fire. I gave him hot milk and I gave him bread. And this man, the farmer, came and he says, this is a Jew. And he took by his head and not to tell them to go, but throw him out through the door. I have this picture in front of my eyes. I will never forget. I couldn't help this child. I couldn't help this child. Next day he was in the field, the Germans came and killed him. And they've been terrible. They've been talking about the Jews. One time I'm going to the field, for work, and I see a little, like a little bumps. I say, what's there? I say, oh, there's the Jews, the Germans killed them. I'm walking all over the graves, whatever. And because when I came, all the Jews, when they lived there, they killed them. There was nobody there. But somehow, I don't know, I was going on. I was just hoping that one day I'm going to see my parents again. That was my only thought. And my brother, in 1944, it was I was in a field and I see some Germans going, soldiers going without these, guns, without anything. Torn, these uniforms and everything. And I say, must be, that the Germans, that something is going on, because we didn't have no radio, we didn't have no paper, we didn't have anything. And when my brother came to me, he says, yes, the Germans, they're going away. And so the Russians came in 1944. They came to the village, I was full of, this pus and everything, because, it was not the nutrition what really we need. I had lots of, bread, but, no fat, no sugars, no anything like this. So, and somehow the blood was, was full of like a pus and everything, and I was full of, what do you call it, what is, so that was, yeah. So that was some doctors, these Russian doctors in the army, so they took care of it and everything, but I still didn't want to tell them, who I am and what's what, because I knew how they feel about Jewish people. And my brother says, okay, I'm going to go and see maybe some Jewish people survived. And he went and towards Warsaw, but Warsaw was still fighting. They still didn't give up. And after a while, he's coming back, and he says, yes, I found some Jewish partisans, and they are in Lublin. It was not that far from this place where we've been, And he took me there, and I said that the first what he introduced me is this, my, future husband. And that's the way he found out, that's because when he went to Warsaw, he was looking for some Jewish people, and they've been the soldiers. And he says, and my husband looked like, future husband looked like a Jew. He says, I'm a Jew. And he told him the story, what's about. He says, no, I don't believe you are not a Jew. He had to pull down his pants and show him, that he is a Jew, because in Poland it's different than here, only Jews been circumcised. So he took him in, he liked him very much, and when he went for a rest, to Lublin, he took him with him, and he introduced me to him, and of course it was quite a few, generals, because they had, after the war, all the partisans, they had a rank, they've been officers or different, who was, fighting, with the Germans. But I say, well, this is all men here and all soldiers. I'm not going to, what I'm going to do here, I felt like lost. So I went back to the farm, back again. And So my brother says, okay, I'm going to look, maybe somebody from our family survived. And whoever he went, he registered, here I am, so-and-so, my name is so-and-so, and I'm looking for a family. And he found my cousin, but she survived under Treblinka, in a hiding place.
Your cousin?
Yeah, my cousin, my first cousin, with these two boys. And the boy were, let's see, 8 and 10, I think. Yeah. The younger one was in age was my little brother. I remember they breathed, I was a little girl, but I remember they breathed, they lived in Pruszków also. And so I went to they had a little place, Sokołów, they call it, it's a small place. And they had a, few zlotys, little money, because they had, some hiding, with them. And they opened a little bakery, and I was working together with them, and sewing a little, for my little cousins, little pants, and of course whatever I was wearing, I was sewing myself. Even on the farm there, I didn't have nothing to wear, this one pair of shoes tore up very quickly. So I had this sack of potatoes he was paying me for. He went and he sold it, and he sold, my wheat, and he bought me a wooden, soles, and he took a little leather on top, a little stripe like, and that was my shoes. And she was weaving, during the winter, making the threads and everything. And she gave me a piece of fabric of the material, and I sewed, little dress for me. It was so stiff, The dress was just like in front, and I was going in the back. And a little sweater I knew how to knit, and she gave me a little, not wool, but whatever it was, fell out, from the wool, linen, or whatever it is. And I was knitting this little socks for me, for myself, and of course I was doing a little sewing, for her and for her husband too. They liked me very much, but it's one thing, I knew that when they would know that I'm Jewish, I wouldn't be here. Absolutely not. So anyway, I was later on with my cousins.
Now, was this area occupied by the Russians at that point?
Yes.
That you could move around?
Yes, by the Russians. And of course the Germans, when they went back, when the Germans, so they occupied the whole Poland, but later when they went farther, a big part of Germany went back to Poland. And anyway, but after the war, there was quite a few, Jewish people around there, they survived. And it was Armia Krajowa, they call it, this Polish army, where they've been killing Jews who survived one after another. So my cousins say, well, it's not safe here, let's go. And first me and those two little sons, we put us in the train, and we went to Pruszków back, to our hometown. He had a big house, he was a very rich man, my cousin.
Was this in 1945?
Already. So the
was about 21 years old at that point.
And so later on they came, and he was doing a little, selling that and selling this, and in the meantime, when I came over there, I didn't have no place to stay, but it was one family that survived. The name was Borenstein. And So I was with them. Of course, it was very many, soldiers, Russian soldiers over there and everything. But she was feeding us, till the cousins will come. And they've been very, very good to me. As a matter of fact, after later on, they went to Canada, and later on, they went to England. And she's still alive. Her husband passed away, in Canada. And I'm in touch with her. As a matter of fact, she was visiting me. It's Hania Borenstein. About 5 years ago she was here. She stayed before. So she's a lovely girl. And but later on, my cousin says, and my future husband, his name was Gotc, Aaron Gotc, G-O-T-Z. Actually, before the war, it's Gotc, G-O-C. When I came to the States, they call us Gotc, we changed it to G-O-T-Z.
You had been in touch with him during this period?
Yes, They sent him to Germany, to Polish, but before it was Germany. They call it Koszalin is in Polish. So my cousin took me there and said, when they sent him over there, he stopped by at Pruszków. And he asked my cousin if he can have me, And my cousin says, well, you are in the army. You don't know where you're going to be. Do you know how you're going to be able to support a wife? And he liked me very much, and I liked him. That was just from the first sight. Whenever I seen him, I seen these good things in his eyes, and he cared for me so much. But after a while, he says, he was in touch with me, so my cousin said, okay, I'm going to take you there to this Kessler, and you're going to get married. I had maybe 2 dresses with me, that's all what I wore, and about 2 pair of shoes already at that time. And of course, it was no rabbi or whatever it is, but it was like what do you call it, in the army, where they give you this, the wedding, the ceremonies and everything. It was maybe 2 other Jewish people, and they're all, all the other Polish guys, these soldiers, and we went together. And he was...
you were 21 then?
Yes. And so later on, we've been looking to go somewhere else. He says, this is not a future. Then later on, they send him to Stettin. Stettin is Stuttgart, not Stuttgart. Yeah. It's in a different, also it's in Germany, but always also there's Russians over there. So he and his friends, from this, was a few friends from the partisans. We opened a little restaurant, and this, the Russian soldiers came, they've been drunk, and one time they didn't, and he was making a little money, selling and buying things, my husband, and, with help with others. He bought me a nice little fur coat, and I was so proud of it. It was the first thing, whatever I owned, it was nice. And I had...
The war had ended by this time?
Yes, this was right after the war. And so I hanged my, I was by the register in the restaurant, and one time these Russian soldiers came, they turned off this, lights. And I said, they want to take away my money. So I was standing by the register, but when they made it light again, I see my fur was gone. Well, anyway, my husband was so good to me. And later on he says, well, it's no use for us to stay around here. We have to go on the American zone someplace, And so he threw away his, uniform and illegal. We went through the border to this, to Berlin, to Germany. And later on he was trying to get in touch with the displaced person camps, but every place was just overcrowded. We couldn't. And talking to this one, to that one, and he found somebody from that his cousin survived, and that was the husband of the cousin. My husband was from Volyn, that was close to the Russian border. And how he survived is, he was 1937, he went to Polish army, you know, like in Polish army, everybody who was 18, 19, 20 had to go be 2 years in the army. So he went in 1937, and he was about to go back home in 1939, and the war broke out, and he was fighting, you know, with this Polish, in the Polish army, and he was taken in the German prison. And he never went back, he never seen, you know, his family again. And so he was in this German prison, but later on they were finding out who was Jewish. You know, he was working, while being in the prison, he was working for the Germans, you know. While they've been fighting, he was working, you know, for German families. And he was a very good worker. And for this army, for the German army, you know, he was in this, what is this, I don't know how to say it, he was riding the horses, you know, cleaning the horses, you know, cavaleria in Polish. And so they liked him very much, he was a good worker, but for him being Jewish, he couldn't be around, you know, the Germans and everything. So one time this officer, the assessment, took him to Majdanek with him. And he sees all this, you know, people, you know, Jewish people with the stripes and everything. He says, what is this? So they told him they've been killing, you know, they've been, you know, gassing the people. And, but he says, if you have a gun, which he had a gun, if he didn't have a gun, if he could get a gun, but he stayed together with this assessment, you know, because he was cleaning for him and everything. We have a connection with the forest, and you can go to the forest, fight over there. So while the German was asleep, he took his gun, and he had the connection, and he went to the forest, and he was in the forest in the partisans.
Now, all right.
And so, yes,
you're after the war, and you get to Berlin.
Yes.
It's not clear what happened after that.
I was in this, you know, and he found this cousin, you know, cousins. So he says, oh, I am in a camp, in a displaced person camps in Feldafing. And, you know, I'm at the committee there. I can put you there. So he took us to Feldafing. You know, this is close to Munich. And beautiful. It's in Bavaria, what do you call it? It's Bayern, you know. What do you call it in English? My mind is going away. So anyway, it was no place to stay. So we stayed with him for a while. Then he found in a villa, in the basement. We had a little, you know, a little bed over there. And we had a little, you know, not a stove, but that's very beautiful, but a little plate, you know, electric plate, so we could cook for ourselves. And we had some food, you know, from this camp. And then later on, we advanced. We had a little place in the attic. So in the meantime, my cousins, what I was with them, you know, I was in touch with them, and they been able to escape, you know, from this, you know, to come to the American zone also. So they stay with us in the attic, you know. We were sleeping on the floor, and we had a little better place just to feed their room. And and I got pregnant, and it was 1947, and my daughter was born, my older one, 1947. In April. It was in Passover. We've been sitting in the attic, and second day of Seder, and I said, well, I have to go. They took me to the hospital, and sure enough, I had this little girl, and it was not easy. But later on, they gave us a little bit bigger room, so I could fit in a little crib, and I was in touch. In the meantime, my brother, in 1945, knowing that I'm in good hands, he went illegal in 1945 to Israel, So, and I was in touch with him all the time. He knew where I was, and he didn't have where to work and where to sleep. It was 45 in Israel. It was very, very bad, very hard. So I was already 4 years in this Feldafing in the camp, this place, and I was ready to go to Israel. I was, we had I bought already a sewing machine, and a few pots. So I was all set to go to Israel. So he wrote to me. He said, we went through so much. If we can go someplace else, go. So I registered to the States. And sure enough, in 3 weeks we had our visa. But my daughter, Esther, she was a very sick girl, the nourishment, we didn't have the fresh milk, we didn't have this, things when they were a child. And she had temperature, and she was, when we went, to go on the ship, I couldn't go because she constantly had temperature. So we stayed in Bremen for about 3 months. And it was like the high holidays in 1949, where they let us in on the boat finally. And, and soon the boat went from this, out. She got well. The change of climate or whatever it is, she got well. But so we went to New Orleans. We went 15 days. We've been on the boat. Just to New York, you had to go only 7 days. But we didn't have no choice. We went to New Orleans, and my husband was very, very sick on the ship. Oh, he was so sick. And of course, the men and women and children, they had to be separate. So I say, I was getting very sick too. But I say, when he's going to come, I'm going to give him the child. I'm going to get very sick. But when he came and I seen him, I say, oh, but all this time he couldn't eat anything. I mean, nothing. He was so sick. A little orange, a little, maybe a little grapefruit or something like that. And I was with Esther. Lots of people, been seasick. It was not a luxury boat, believe me. It was a military boat, this Bettinger, I think, was the name of the boat. And I had to go to feed this child. She was 2.5 years old. She was so hungry. She was going from, the trays been fastened, and the food was on the trays. And she was going from one tray to the other, picking up stuff, what she likes. And I was so sick looking at it. But finally we made it. It was a beautiful, the Jewish family service done for us so much, so much.
In New Orleans?
New Orleans, yeah. And since we've been, my husband put it down that you have to have a trade to be able to go somewhere, because we didn't have no family, we didn't have nobody. So he put down that he's like a tailor, like a presser, and it was, and I was put down that I'm a seamstress, which I knew how to sew. And so they said, gave us $10 in our pocket, the Jewish family service. But anyway, they gave us food and everything, put us on a train, and then they sent us to St. Louis. Of course, beginning is not. It was very hard, you know. They've been giving us little money, you know, here and there, but you know, they told us now how to eat. And I was going, and I say, I need for the child this and that. They say, well, you cannot give, you know, a fresh milk. You have to give, and then margarine is cheaper than butter, you know, stuff like that. And I was crying. I didn't know what margarine was. I knew the concentration camps. They've been giving margarine. I didn't know that margarine is really good for you. So I was so nervous, and I broke out with hives. So my husband says, no, you're not going anymore. I'm going to work. So he had a job in a shoemaker, 30 cents an hour. And then later on I took Esther, you know, my child, you know, to and we didn't have no money to pay for a nursery school or kindergarten or whatever. She was 2.5 years old, so I gave her to a church. And they've been taking care of her, you know, every day. I took the bus and I dropped her off there after the work. And I went to work for a cap factory to sew on the machine. They showed me how. It was 35 cents an hour, pretty good. And so we worked very, very hard, very hard. My husband even later on, he took 2 jobs. And we saved up $800. In 1952, no, in the meantime, I was expecting with another child. Well, yeah, I was still, you know, in this little apartment there. And when she was born, and my husband was taking 2 jobs. He had 2 jobs, so we've been saving. And so another, you know, newcomer in the same shop, he says, well, he was living with somebody. He said, the house has been very cheap, so let's buy something, you know, and have a roof over our heads. So he had to borrow some money, and I had the $800, and we paid in for a 4-family house. We lived downstairs, me and him, and the upstairs, the people, the tenants, they paid the rent, the mortgage, whatever it was. So it was, you know, and we've been, in the same time came, you know, a few newcomers. We got very, very close. That was our family. We've been, you know, had birthdays. We've been making together, and the children later on, you know, going to school, and it was a very, very good life. Good life, you know, hard but good. So later on, our cousins, they went to Davenport, Iowa, and they've been working in a factory too, and he had some money. So I said, what, you work in a factory, you know, you have a little money. Come on, you know, somebody told us in a little grocery store, we can buy the grocery store together. And sure enough, he came, and we bought this. Oh, that's enough.
I think perhaps we've got 6 minutes left on the tape.
Yeah.
That maybe it would be a good idea if we took a break now. And so,
yeah. Well, I was involved with different things.
Well, no, I'm glad it's fascinating.
I have to
recount it.
Yeah.
Show the pictures now?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
You want to show the pictures now?
No, we still haven't gotten her to California in the second husband.
Well, actually, when I told you how I saw
Mary Rothschild assisting, you were talking. We had gotten up to the point where you and your husband and your 2 children were living in St. Louis and doing quite well. Can you summarize for us what happened?
No, I didn't give you a signal, so you didn't. So you'll have to start over again in about 10 seconds. They point to you.
Now you know what to say.
Sorry. You spoke too fast.
You rehearsed.
This is videotape number 2 on July 29th, 1992. I'm Helen Rubenstein interviewing Regina Friedland, assisted by Mary Rothschild. Mrs. Friedland, we have you and your husband and your 2 children in St. Louis. Things are going well for you. Can you summarize now what happened, how you got to California, and what your current situation is?
Well, we were in this little business, as I say, it was not easy. It was a little neighborhood store. We had about 10 hold-ups, more or less. And we've been together with the cousins, in this little business here. So in 1972, my husband says, well, he wanted to see Israel, and I didn't see my brother, who lives in Haifa, he went 1945 there. And it was my niece's wedding. He says, let's go for the wedding and let's see Israel. So we closed up this little store, and he went. We took all the tour, and he was so proud, see all these borders, from this Israel. See, on Israel side was all green, on the other side, the Arab side was all yellow, and he was so proud of everything. Of course, these, tours are not easy. And especially when we've been in Haifa, all the steps and everything. He had little problems, like the doctor never told him that he had a heart problem. He always said that's nerves or whatever it is. But the steps, I don't think that helped him a lot. But anyway, it was just 2 days. We've been in there 2 weeks. And it was just 2 days before we had to go back home. It was the wedding. The wedding was on a Sunday, and we had to go back like on a Tuesday. And we had a nice time on the wedding. It was the ceremony. I have all the pictures and everything. And we've been dancing and we've been eating. And then we were sending, I had some people, been Israel, I knew him from my hometown. And he was even joking to me, my husband. He says, you forgot that you have a husband. I say, oh, this is my husband, and I was been laughing. And he had to tell me something. He was looking at me, and he dropped, and it was all over. It was a terrible shock. It was a doctor on the place over there. Nothing, anything. So you can imagine, so far. And took him to the hospital, and I just didn't know yet. I couldn't believe it. But nothing. It was just all over. And I was disappointed, very disappointed at everything. I said, how,
Did you and the children come back to St. Louis at that time? After?
My children didn't come, only me and my husband. See, my daughter, my older daughter was married already, and she lived in Los Angeles. She married in 1968. She had a little girl, she was 70, she was about 2 years old. And my younger daughter was going to college, to St. Louis University, Washington U in St. Louis. She was 18, she was 18-year-old, 19-year-old. She had another year to go, I think, or 2 years to go to college. And I was so disappointed, I brought him back home. I said, we went together, I cannot leave him in Israel. I brought him back to my children. I said, I cannot come back to my children, only by myself. And I buried him there. And so I couldn't hold on to this, to the little store, because the neighborhood was not so great. And I almost gave it away, for a little nothing. And then my younger daughter, she finished college. In the meantime, I couldn't find myself a place, and I went to work. I was working for May Company, St. Louis's famous bar. And after she finished college, she says no, she doesn't want to be in St. Louis. She wants to go to Los Angeles, where her sister is. So we decided. She went first, and then later on I gave up my home and I went to Los Angeles also. And I was very lonesome because I had so many friends. It was just like my family in St. Louis. And somebody introduced me to Mr. Friedland, so Mike Friedland. He's from Warsaw. We speak the same language. He was by himself. So we decided to get married. And he's a very good man. He's a very good man. He understands me, I understand him. And it seems like life is going on. And,
Before you show some of the pictures that you have brought with you, I'd like to ask Miss Rothschild if she has any comments or questions.
Yeah, I would like to know, you seem to have a lot of pictures from before the war. Where were they? Where were they kept? How did you hang on to them?
Well, from before the war, actually, I had little baby pictures, only my mother, my little brother, and my father and my little brother. And I have me when I was 12-year-old. And of course this is one what I had.
I guess the question, Mrs. Friedland, is
how did
your experiences running and not packing a suitcase, so to speak. How were you able to keep those pictures with you?
These little pictures, I had it with me. I had this with me. I took it, from Ghetto when I ran away. But it was not much. I had this with me all the time.
You kept those pictures with you throughout the war?
Yeah. Yes. We were right there. And that's the only pictures
Did you keep them on your body? How did you?
No. I had it, I had a couple of pair of underpants and stuff like that. And she gave me, this farmer gave me a little space in the trunk. And I had it together with this, it was not much.
Would you like to show us some of the things that you brought with you?
Well, from before the war, this is me when I was 12. This is my little brother when he was, maybe he was 6-year-old that time. In this picture, it was my mother shortly before the war. And this is shortly before the war, on the street, like a snapshot, my father and my little brother. When they took him away, my mother was 48, my father was 54. My little brother was around 9-year-old when they took him. He took him together with my mother.
Do you also have a document that states that you were Christian during the war?
So yes, so this, when my brother was working for the Germans on the railroad, and he bought these pictures, from the pole, from the Christian, and this is something what it shows, it's in Polish, of course, proboszcz, that's from this church, and has this, cross here, the stamp that my name was Halina Dworzańska. I was under this name. And my brother was Józef Dobrzański. So we've been telling, because we look very much alike, the resemblance was course, I say, well, you are a sister and brother, but, this is he's from the first marriage of my mother. I'm from the second. That's why his name was, because we couldn't get the same,
Could you show us the document with your so-called fictitious name?
Yeah, and then later on, when I was on the farm, everybody had to have a Kennkarte. This is something, that with a Hakenkreuz, which you can see here. So I went to this place, to this little town in order to get it. But, so they asked me if I'm registered. Of course, I couldn't say. I say I'm from Warsaw, and I couldn't say I'm registered or not, but I was shaking all over. I thought this is the end of me. And so he asked me, who was a very nice, guy. He asked me if I have a picture. I say yes, and I showed him this picture. Oh, he says, very, very nice picture. I say, yeah, I made it in Warsaw. I couldn't tell. Could I tell him that I made it in the Ghetto? So anyway, he says, okay, we will need you. We're going to find you, and put this, fingerprints, which is right here. And this is the name, Dworzańska, Halina. And this, my birth certificate was, which I misplaced. It was born 1922 in Warsaw. And I lived in, that was, what do you call this? That's close to Siedlec, this place, the farm. And they'd call him Czuriwy.
You wanted to...
Siedlce, 27/7/1943. That's when I made this document.
You wanted to show us a couple of pictures in that book.
Yeah, I want to show you from a partisans. That's where my Gotc, my first husband, he
Please
was
take down all the other photos.
in the partisans. This is me on the farm with this priest sister. I was a very good friend with her. I was going to church almost every day. I was cleaning the altar and, doing all those things. And I didn't know how to really, the communion and what do you call it when you say the sins, this confession, yeah. And, they told me to go, I took this, right,
The wafer.
Yes, the communion and everything, and went to the other, altar and, mea culpa. And then I was, I didn't say, I don't know what to tell him, when I was saying it. I made up my sins. I was a good girl, really. So, and later on I was saying lots of prayers. Maria, Joseph, they didn't do so much, so and so, and say prayers. Okay.
What is the other picture with it?
This is from my husband, when he was in the partisans. And let's see. This is my father and mother. When they found, I have a book from Pruszków, from my town, that somebody, made it, after the war, whatever pictures they found. So they, put it in the book. And, of course, I have it, in this book. So this is this Umschlagplatz. There are the trains. Yeah, this is the trains in Umschlagplatz. So they've been taking those people from the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka. This is the trains. And of course...
Did you bring that book with you from Poland?
No, I bought it. Somebody came from Poland, because this is all written in Polish. They, had it done, from...
And that was published and written in 1966, as I remember.
This one here. See, this one is in... That's okay. This one is in Warsaw Ghetto. That's where we had the bonus, the Lebenskarte, what you could cut out a little thing and you got a little piece of bread or a little something, was next. That was next to nothing really. You couldn't live on 120 calories a day. So just people been dying all over. And then how we survived. Well, this is a very interesting. That was the biggest synagogue in Warsaw, Tłomacka. It was, my second husband. He was the big shot in this, in the synagogue. It was a beautiful, but it was all destroyed in the war. This is from my hometown. He was a fighter in Warsaw Ghetto. We've been going to school together. Zachariasz Archstein. This is the partisans. This actually is after the war. See, all the partisans. This is my husband. So lots of them I know. I met them, after the war.
Mrs. Friedland,
Yeah.
you've given a very interesting and moving story, and I want to thank you for coming and helping us in our project, and wishing you all the luck in the world.
I thank you very, very much, because my children really, they want to know and to have something to remember, and I really appreciate.
Would you like to?
Yes, thank you also.
Thank you
For
very much.
doing this.
Thank you very, very much for your time.